So that's good. So I'm here really because the conference has been around digital transformation, just to share my story in the hope that you can resonate it with where you work and what you do. Can I just ask for a show of hands, who works in healthcare? Okay, one. Well, hopefully you'll get something out of it. I'm sure you will. So a little bit about my role. So I've already said I was managing director. As well as being the CIO effectively of Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust, I'm also the managing director of the Health Informatics Service. And the Health Informatics Service basically is an IM&T support organisation for predominantly West Yorkshire, and it's hosted by Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust. So I've sort of got two roles, two hats, two jobs, but only get one salary. I think the important bit that will play through the presentation is my role is part of the exec team of the Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust board, and that means I directly report to the CEO, Chief Exec. That's unusual in healthcare, because normally the IT lead as such reports through finance director or the medical director. They don't normally have a place at the board, and I've seen that as a big thing for me because I've been able to have access to the people that I need to influence when it comes to digital transformation. So the journey in Calderdale started really in 2012, where I inherited a digital strategy, and that was about the trust wanted to become paperless, not just to get the tag, but it was all about trying to get safe and make our patients safe by removing paper. There was a real commitment at the time because Owen, the chief exec, had just arrived in wanting to invest money in digital, and particularly in the infrastructure. So we've talked a lot today, we've seen all the presentations about cyber, etc. That's quite close to my heart actually, because the infrastructure piece has been the most important part of the investment, because without that we wouldn't have been able to get all the shiny new stuff to sit on top of it. There's no point putting nice clinical systems on an infrastructure that's going to let you down at some point or isn't safe. So that's where it all started. And our vision was, although it was a 5-year strategy to 2017, the vision was to become paperless in 2020. And I have to say, we're not far from that right now. And I'm not going to read through all those, but you know, we had paper notes following patients around a hospital. And if that patient ended up somewhere else the next day, we could never find those paper notes. So how can you treat a patient correctly without being able to get access to that information quickly? So our digital journey really started back in 2013, where we did a complete infrastructure refresh. We made all the infrastructure resilient, safe, all those things. I have to say we probably have to do a bit more work now because time has moved on. But we also thought about how do you introduce technology into an organisation where everybody's on paper quickly and safely. So we decided to look at what can we do to make our workforce interact with digital more often. Before we get to that big bang electronic patient record, that was sort of going to be the icing on the cake. So we talked about where we had a few burning platforms. So you'll all work in organisations where you're coming to the end of your contract, you need to think about, do I renew it or do I get a new system? And we started to look at what new systems might we put in there that will complement what we're trying to do when we go to the electronic patient record. So we did things like Nerve Centre, not being in healthcare, you probably won't know what that is, but basically that actually electronically captures a patient's vital signs. And what it will then do, if that patient's vital signs aren't very good, it will alert a nurse or a doctor, depending on how severe it was, to go and look at them. Yeah? So that made virtually every healthcare professional in the hospital use technology, because if that patient wasn't registered to our hospital, they weren't allowed to take the vital signs. If you didn't take the vital signs, that patient could get poorly and you wouldn't know. So it really sort of started to make the workforce adopt technology. So it was purposely put in for that reason. We needed a new theatre system, so we introduced Blue Sphere. Well, the one I want to talk to you about more out of that list, and then I'll move on to the next slide, was we actually procured an electronic document management system. And all those notes that were floating around the hospital, we actually scanned and made them more digital, more electronic than automation, but we actually made them more digital, because what we thought that would then force people to go to their computer to look for patient information that they needed in order to treat that patient. A lot of people thought that was the EPR, but it wasn't. I got lots of kickback on the EVMS project because it was clunky, it wasn't easy to get into, it wasn't easy to navigate, and I think the pain was worth it in the long term. So I don't know what organisations you work for, but if you can try and remove paper in a different way before you put your big system in, then I would completely support that. So the story I was here to tell you was about our Big Bang deployment, so I sort of labelled it the Big Bang Theory, and would I do it again? So we started a procurement back in 2014, but at the same time we actually coupled up with another trust down the road to do a joint procurement with Bradford Teaching Hospital, and one that was a bit of a case for money, you might save a bit of money, but actually what it was actually joining the patient population together, because a lot of our patients in Bradford, Halifax and Calderdale would actually visit our hospitals for different reasons at different times, so it seemed the right thing to do for the patient. Once we'd gone through that procurement, we actually started the project of developing the electronic patient record in May 2015, and unique to this project, it was going to be one single instance for both trusts, and it wasn't a merger, it was two independent trusts doing the same thing. It was the first time it had been done in the UK at the time. We knew there were numerous benefits. There were loads of benefits, around 50 benefits around putting in an electronic patient record, but we still focused on, it was about patient safety, and it was about increasing the quality of our clinical care, but also about improving the workforce experience as well. We did a business case that paid for itself. We weren't looking to take loads of money out of the system as a result of deploying it, and some of you will know, some of you won't know, you know, there is a shortage of nurses and doctors. Why would we concentrate on taking people out when we actually needed more? What we wanted to do is make their access to information easier, so that was really important. As part of the joint procurement, we had to have a strong collaboration. Two single trusts that came together with joint governance. Both our chief execs were SROs of the transformation board that we put together. We shared standard operating procedures, we shared resource, so we had knowledgeable staff across the two. But it was a three-way partnership. I don't know whether I'm allowed to advertise, but we basically got a Cerner product for our EPR, and it was a three-way partnership. It wasn't just about the two trusts. We had to work really closely with our supplier. And it did work well in lots of areas because we had that shared pool of resources. We had really good clinical engagement, so despite what you might hear about doctors, actually they were really good. They were really, really well behaved. It was the people who were in the operating areas that used to fall out, but the actual clinical professionals couldn't wait for this to happen, and doing the same thing for all our patients. They thought it were great. It improved our resilience, so if something went wrong over in Calderdale, there's a failover to Bradford, so the whole thing was much more resilient by doing it across the two trusts. It was a bit competitive, so we wanted to do better than Bradford and they wanted to do better than us, but that was healthy competition. And we were able to engage a lot of champions across both trusts, and when we got to the Big Bang deployment, actually using that resource to help each other over the line really, really helped us. Now, we weren't doing this independently thinking we were all great because we were going to do this great EPR. We did actually get some external assurance because it was such a big project and it impacted on so many things and so many people. If this thing failed as we switched it on, we were in trouble because we would not have access to information that was vital to help treat the patient. So we did a gateway review. We had 3 different gateway reviews. One was, have we set the project up right? The other one, how's it progressing? And the third was, can we actually switch it on? And that was done externally, so it wasn't about just us feeling confident. We actually had some external assurance to say we were ready to switch that button on. And as part of that, we had some real issues. I've already touched on a few. We've talked about culture last session. I think Gabby was in here talking about culture. My God, you couldn't have had 2 different cultures if you'd have tried. Quite an open and honest, transparent trust, and then a real sort of command and control trust. But I sort of worked to help really, because we sort of were somewhere in the middle, and it sort of helped get things right. It was first of type for Cerner. I think it's been done before, but 2 trusts, biggest in the UK, biggest in Europe at the time. The scope was huge. When you go to a Big Bang, and I'll talk about the scope later, The decision making was hard because you're always going to side to your trust a little bit, and that sometimes slowed us down a little bit, but we got there in the end. Finding enough experts, we had this crazy idea that we'd go live all together at the same time, and realised that if we did that we wouldn't have enough people, so that even the market couldn't have stood it at the time. So finding enough experts was a challenge at the time. The digital maturity, one trust was a lot less digitally mature, so Bradford, great place now, but they didn't do all those tacticals before they went live on EPR, so it was quite a change for them. We'd started to make that change. Third party involvement, you've always got, sorry if you're from a supplier, you've all got suppliers who want to do their bit or don't want to play the game or don't want to be part of it, so we sometimes had challenges around that. And you know, whilst the project was a success, we did have a bit of slippage for all sorts of reasons, which again was a challenge. So our scope, and apologies because I know a lot of you don't work in healthcare, but we did it across all inpatients, people in beds. We did it all over our clinics, and we also did it in our emergency departments. That's unheard of in the NHS. They normally do a bit of an incremental rollout. And we did it across our patient administration, all our medical and nursing notes, all our orders were done electronically, we prescribed electronically, we followed our patients, which what capacity management is, electronically. We also introduced a health information exchange, which I've talked to you about, is it Paul? Yeah, about how we connect with the outside world. So this project wasn't just about the hospitals. We started with our eye on what do we need to do in the hospital that will serve the whole population. So what do we do outside of the hospital? And we have what we call a patient portal, which has been live in Calderdale now for the past 2 years. And this is what happened. So in May 2017, I remember it, I wear the scars. We went fully live in Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust on the Millennium patient record. And that was the plan. So we got rid of the crazy idea of going live all together. Calderdale went first. Bradford went second, and I hate to admit this, but their go live was better than ours. But I think that was because of the learning. We were able to capture the learning immediately, and then 16 weeks later, you didn't think they'd done it. It was so good because they'd learned so much, and they'd got a load of people from Calderdale that could go across and do it with them because they'd already been through that pain. So, you know, there's something to be said by joining up, and we've learned a lot. And I think it's a model now that the NHS are looking to implement. So we were fully live as a project in 2017. We had a system build freeze in between that 16 weeks because we couldn't change the system at all before we went live with Bradford, because that would mean the training had to be done differently, etc., etc. So that was a challenge for CHFT. We were able to share the lessons learned, and I've already mentioned how big it was, keep telling you that. So this is just some stats that we got from the system as it went live, and this was something we were really quite proud of because of the kind of information that our clinicians were starting to use and what this was doing as far as being able to access information quickly to help serve our patients. And I'm not going to go through every one, but you know, we've got 2,274 people, individuals in that hospital that day accessing a patient record all at the same time, and they could even access a patient record that somebody else was accessing. So if they were in different departments, it was a real opportunity. You could even access patient record if a doctor was up on the ward dealing with a patient, we had an emergency in ED, that doctor on that ward could see that patient information straight away. They could see their vital signs straight away. So immediately they could make a recommendation. So it just brought that safety element straight away. And these are Bradford figures as they went live, very similar. They've got 32,000 charts were accessed, we just did it by people. But all in all, this kind of information was telling us, actually, we've done a good job. And these stats I'll just go through quickly, I'm not going to read them all out, but I'm sort of pointing at this bit here, this first out of 17, this first out of 18, because what we realised by doing the Big Bang, when we compared to other trusts that have done an incremental rollout, actually, we were ranking first for access to the information, because they had to do it in every department. There was no, we do paper over here and we do electronic over here. And these were the figures, and these were the KPIs we used. Fact, first out of 11 sites, first out of 17, and and this within weeks of us getting the electronic patient record. So that big bang bit was the reason why that happened. So we didn't stop there, or we hadn't stopped there, so we celebrated a very little bit, and then we decided, what do we do next? And as far as CHFT was concerned, we delivered our digital strategy, because that EPR was the end of our 5-year strategy. But we knew we needed to continue on the journey. That was just the start. Rather than rush to go and write another strategy, thank God, we actually decided we needed some digital next steps, because what we realised was it's not until it really goes in that you realise what you can really do. And rather than go out and think, well, what do we buy next? We said, how can we get the most out of what we've got? So we looked about how we've transitioned from that paper world into the digital world. How do we stabilise it? Because people out there were still quite upset, and I don't like doing this. And how do we stabilise it? We have to do some re-education. People have forgotten how to use it. Some people got trained 8 weeks away from go live because we had 6,000 staff to train. And how do we optimise what we've got? And that's not about buying more. We knew the system was capable of doing much more. So we wrote a document that was approved by our board and started to work through that. So in May this year, I'm about to get our next digital strategy signed off by our board. And I've already started engaging with people about what we believe should be part of that. And because we've had a shiny new object and a lot of technology introduced from a clinical perspective, that strategy will concentrate on our underlying infrastructure, because it's nearly 7 years ago, well 8 years ago, since we actually refreshed our infrastructure, and we know if we want to do more, the next step is to make sure that infrastructure continues to be current and resilient, and that's what that strategy will recommend. And what we will spend is time unlocking the value of what we've already got in to help it work better. One of the things that we have done, and I speak to Paul about earlier, is the health information exchange that I mentioned earlier. We have actually connected that up to our GP practices, so the GP can actually see into the hospital record. So if you as a patient walked along to your GP, they looked into their own record, and you said, I was in the hospital 3 days ago, they could immediately see what happened to you in the hospital that day, and that would give them more information, even your medications, to help treat you. That's now live, and we can also see from the hospital into the GP system, because they're 2 different systems. And in 6 weeks' time, we're about to do the same connectivity with our social care colleagues, so that our patients then, when they come into any of those settings, will have a full record of what's happened in the hospital, what's happened in the GPs, and what's happening in social care. And that's the first of type as far as the UK is concerned. That's the story. Any questions?
I want to throw at you. In terms of measurement and so on from outside, you've got some lovely stats and so on to show how good it is. How do you think has impacted patient care? Because that's the sort of the
absolutely.
The end customer.
Wow. So part of what we deployed, I'll give you a scenario. With your ECG management, so your heart rate stuff, coming to the ED. So a few weeks ago, a patient comes into A&E, obviously having some kind of problem with the heart. We have a monitor in an ED, or most EDs do, takes the heart trace and it pings straight into the record. So it used to be printed out and you'd see all these trace things, and then that would go on top of the patient. The patient would get wheeled off somewhere and somebody would look at it. Well, that piece of paper now just goes straight into the patient record, yeah? And what happened to this patient is they were obviously very poorly. The registrar was up on a ward. We rang them and said, can you look at this? He logged on, he looked at it, and he said, you need to get into Leeds, because that's our triage centre, and we saved that patient's life. Now, had we not been able to do that electronically, that patient could have died. I interviewed for a consultant, and I was chief exec on the board because I could get that privilege now and again, who had been working as a junior doctor in our trust pre-PR, and were coming to, and then had joined us as a locum, but then had applied for a job. And she talked about a scenario where, unfortunately, the patient had been lost in another hospital that she was working in. And I said, had that patient been in here, and you've got what you've got now with the digital experience, what would have happened? She said, that patient would still be alive, because what I was told about this patient's vital signs, I couldn't physically see. if I could have physically seen those signs, I would have been able to make a better diagnosis, and that patient probably could still be with us. So I just, if you think about you going to an outpatient clinic, say you're going to an outpatient clinic, or you're an inpatient, and then you get discharged one day, and unfortunately you have a fall and break your leg, you end up back in A&E. Finding those notes immediately for a patient is really quite difficult, because they're probably still on the ward, or they might be in the coding office. And there's no real tracking system once they're out of the warehouse. But by having an EPR, the notes don't need to be there, because your patient sort of episode is already written up in that EPR record. So patient safety wise, it's just so many stories where it proves. And we haven't taken, so I did a benefits case for our board last year, and we proved that through some time saved, that it had actually paid for itself. And that's all our board wanted to know. But there's just loads of stories where it has really improved patient safety.
You mentioned the time. How much potential time can you return to direct patient care removing that manual paper portion?
So that's a good question, depends who you ask, yeah, because our consultant doctors probably in the realms at the moment where they think they spend more time typing than they did before. But our nurses and HCAs, healthcare assistants, feel as though they've freed up time because they're not running around getting everything they need to get for the doctors and the consultants. So I think it's more in the nursing world where the time has really sort of been released, and it's actually just put less pressure on our workforce, because we're tight, nurses are tight, we've got a 15% vacancy factor, so it's been able to release time that way, purely by not, one of the matrons every night at 6 o'clock used to run around all the wards and find how many empty beds we have. That'll tell us now how many empty beds. She didn't have to do that running around and write it all down. You know, so it's just snippets of time everywhere. If you go onto the ward now and say, I'm going to switch it off, they'd just throw me through the window. Yeah, which is great, yeah.
How did you join up primary and secondary data? And how did you get around the GDPR issue around EMS and...
Good question. Sorry, it's only one question. Are we all right, Robin? I'm going to finish now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So that's good. So we've not joined the data up yet. We've just joined the view of the data up. So I think that's the next step. The data's there.
Yeah.
We're doing some population health work with Calderdale CCG, where we will be joining the data up. But to start with, we just gave the view, because you're right, you've got all your data sharing agreements. They've got to be in place before you even do the view piece. So getting over the GDPR and the governance, and it's about getting both sides together, because it's appetite to do it.
It's for the common good.
Yeah, well, GDPR does actually say, we'll have to go, but GDPR does actually say you can access data as long as it's for care. You've almost got that direct without seeking permission.
Someone just needs to publish that, because
Yeah.
people are
They don't
interpreting
understand it,
No,
you're right,
exactly.
they don't understand it. But that's the next step to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.